Hey guys, George at the Ski Monster, and today joining me is Dr. Andrew Horton, one of my friends and roommates from college, that is going to help us dive into some issues with ankle mobility and why that is so important in ski boots. We just recorded a reel that we posted on Instagram, and people asked us to go more in depth as to why your heels are lifting in ski boots. And one of the reasons for that is there's simply too much room on top of your foot. Now, one of those solutions could be you just need to buckle this down a little bit more aggressively, or the boots are simply too big. You have too much room on top of your foot. And when you're standing in the boots and you go like this, you feel like you can get motion going up because there's nothing holding you down. Now, that's one reason. The other reason your heels can be lifting in boots, and if you look at this guy here, you can see this angle going forward. Now, if you don't have good enough ankle mobility, you don't have good enough dorsiflexion, getting into this position that the ski boot is in can be really difficult, and your heels feel like they're elevated all the time, or especially like they're lifting when you're going to flex forward in the ski boots. And Andrew, you're a doctor of physical therapy. How can we test to see if someone has good ankle mobility or not? And I don't know if I'm using those words correctly in your terms, but how can we assess that? What's something you could do at home to figure that out?
Sure. Lots of simple ways to measure your own dorsiflexion to make sure you have adequate dorsiflexion. But one test that I really like, if you want to put the boot down,
Sure.
let's have you just kick off your right shoe.
Shoe. Okay.
So a nice easy test is the half kneeling dorsiflexion test. So you could either take a piece of tape and measure 4 inches away from a wall, or you could just use your fist. And I'm going to have you come kneel on that left knee. Bring your right foot to my hand here. Back it up just a little bit. There you go. No cheating. And then from here, can you get your knee to touch the wall without letting your knee drop towards me? Keep it over your second and third toe.
Yep.
Okay. If you can touch the wall, that's a sign that you have adequate dorsiflexion in my world, which we would want to measure to make sure you have a normal gait pattern, or if you can squat, go up and down stairs, do athletic movements.
But I should also be able to do this getting to the wall without my heel lifting off the ground.
Correct.
Right? It's staying flat.
Yep. Heel's got to stay down. So yeah, do that one more time. Keep that heel down. Good.
So I can get to the wall. So that means I have adequate dorsiflexion and my dorsiflexion is good?
Yes.
So if I didn't have good dorsiflexion, where would my knee be getting to? Like how close to this thing am I getting?
So, you could be an inch, you could be 2 inches. If you can't get to the wall, that's kind of like, hey, you've got to work on your dorsiflexion because you're limited. So that's kind of like the standard is you got to get that knee to the wall.
Now, I guess measuring enough feet here, not everyone is symmetrical. So it is possible that someone would have adequate dorsiflexion on one side, but not the other side.
Yes, oftentimes we'll see people, whether it be because of a past injury or whatever, footwear, there might be one side might be asymmetrical compared to the other side.
Now, you mentioned footwear. Why would footwear play a part in dorsiflexion?
So yeah, if we're looking at many shoes out there, a Hoka for example, they have a built-in heel lift. So that heel lift is gonna bring your heel above your toes and essentially allow you to cheat if you are limited in dorsiflexion, or not really allow you to get into full dorsiflexion because it's doing it for you. So that's not good because now your Achilles is in a shortened position. So now the muscles are going to adapt to that. Your calf is going to get tighter. And it could just lead to more limited, kind of feeds more into this problem of limited dorsiflexion.
So me wearing a shoe like a Hoka could make it so I can't get into dorsiflexion, which would give me problems once I get out onto the hill, potentially, is what you're saying.
Yes, when it comes to dorsiflexion, it would limit, it's going to feed into limited dorsiflexion.
Okay.
Which could be a problem once you get into your ski boot and on your skis.
So you mentioned how your choice in footwear can affect your ability to have adequate dorsiflexion. I'm assuming, I guess it's safe to say like lifestyle could have an impact on that as well. If you're not active, if you're sitting all the time, you're probably not going to have great dorsiflexion. What are some other reasons why someone would have poor dorsiflexion, which is needed to be in ski boots?
Sure. Yeah. So it could be because of past injuries, whether you've sprained your ankle multiple times, strained your calf, uh, Achilles rupture, maybe you've had a fracture in your foot and you've have either hardware in there or you've have certain joints in your foot fused. All these things could limit your dorsiflexion. And also just to speak to the lifestyle things that you were just talking about too and how that can help improve dorsiflexion. I think whether you are in a Nike or a Hoka, any of these shoes that kind of let you cheat by having a heel lift built into them, it's not that they're bad shoes, um, but you need to know that it can kind of make you a little more prone to um, limited dorsiflexion by causing your calves maybe to be a little bit tighter. So what I always tell people is you should be in a couple of different sneakers and be able to kind of switch through them. And one of those being maybe a minimalist sneaker that has zero or minimal heel lift in it. So it's got good heel drop so that you can spend time in neutral or in more dorsiflexion because it's going to make it easier to when you need to get into a ski boot or to get into more athletic activities, whether it's running, basketball, soccer, that sort of stuff.
So big part of a ski boot's job is to keep you in a ready athletic position, and that's why boots are built so substantially and look like they're keeping you in a ready position. And a prerequisite is you really need to have dorsiflexion in order to be in that ready position. Now, a lot of times in here, we see people coming in with these heel lifts that are sometimes really pretty big and they have adequate dorsiflexion. What are some issues that skiers are going to feel once they get out on the hill as you elevate their heel more than what came stock in the boot?
So we want to be in an athletic position when we're in our boot. So we want to be slightly bent at the knees and our weight shifted forward. Now it sounds good to put a heel lift in there because that sounds like it's going to shift our weight further forward, but it's going to shift our center of gravity forward, which is going to force us to sit back in our ski. Now we're skiing in the back seat. That's a problem for a couple of reasons. Now our toes are jamming forward in the boot. Our shins are fatiguing, our quads are fatiguing, our glutes are fatiguing. We're overworking here, and this all could have been avoided if we didn't have a heel lift in the boot and you worked on your dorsiflexion.
Now, when we have someone come in here, we're obviously, talking to the customer about, some sensitivities they have. We're taking all these measurements. One of those being, assessing how much dorsiflexion they have. And a red flag for us is if they don't have any. And we need to get them into a ski boot that's more upright and honestly on the stiffer side to work within the parameters that they're capable of doing. Because if the boot is too soft, then when they're encountering, steeper terrain or some bumps, they're kind of getting kicked around and their foot wouldn't be, planted or seated in the bottom. Now, for some of these individuals that have had surgeries, maybe they have some hardware in the foot, adjusting the cuff to be more upright isn't enough. They still feel like their heel is elevated off the ground because even after those adjustments, this angle is too aggressive for what their ankle is capable of doing. So we put in small heel lifts so their foot can actually be planted in the boot.
So yeah, that sounds like a great solution for your post-surgical population, that person who has hardware in their foot or ankle that doesn't allow them to really get dorsiflexion. They've worked on it and they just, no matter what they do, because they have something in there that's preventing them from achieving more dorsiflexion. And why I see people in my clinic, whether it be getting into skiing or maybe it's they show up with low back pain after bagging, leaves for 4 hours, people don't do enough preparation for the task or the activity that they want to do. So if you go and start doing yard work after not doing it all year long and you do 4 hours of that, you might end up with like an overuse type of injury or some pain. Same thing goes for skiing. If you don't prepare your body to ski and then you go on a 2-day trip or whatever, you're going to end up with possibly some injuries or some overuse type of injury.
Now, I think when a lot of people are thinking about prep for getting ready for ski season, like you were just talking about, they're specifically thinking about their quads, hamstring, glutes, maybe a bit of core exercises, but they're not thinking about what this whole video is about, and that is ankle mobility and dorsiflexion and how important that is.
Sure. I mean, I think it's all important because it's a total body activity. So, and your ankle, that's the first thing that connects you to the ground. So you've got to have the groundwork set up right on that ankle mobility piece to kind of optimize everything else from the ankle up, your knees, your quads, your glutes, your core.
And I think it's important for people to understand, like, when these ski boots are being designed, they're designing them with the thought that you have good ankle mobility or good dorsiflexion. Like, it is a prerequisite that you have that. And if you don't, we have to do some goofy custom work to make that work out for you. But ultimately, you really need good dorsiflexion to thrive out there on the ski hill. What are some things you can do to get dorsiflexion back? What are some things you can do at home? What would be some first steps?
Sure. So let's get into just some ankle mobility exercises first. So I'm going to kick my shoes off because there's a heel lift built into that, and we don't want to cheat when we're doing these exercises. So the first exercise is just some half kneeling dorsiflexion. So the test becomes the exercise that we did earlier. So we're going to just think about keeping our knee over our second and third toes as we drive our knee forward. So that's going to help work on some joint mobility through that ankle joint. So you may feel this in the back, or you might even feel it in the front. But we want to just kind of push into that. 2 sets of 10 like this. And again, we don't want to let that knee cave in because what happens is, instead of us getting true dorsiflexion through that ankle joint, we're going to end up pronating through our foot and kind of cheating and getting a false sense of dorsiflexion here. Okay. Now we worked on the joint mobility. Now I'm going to show you a couple stretches for the muscles that might limit your dorsiflexion. So the 2 muscles that limit dorsiflexion are your calf muscle and your soleus. So 2 simple stretches that you can do at home, like right at a wall. You can get into like a lunge position and you'd be posted up against a wall here. And my left leg is the one that we're stretching out. So we're going to keep that knee straight on that back leg, and you're just leaning into the wall until you feel a good stretch in the calf muscles up top here. Hanging out there for like 30 seconds for a couple repetitions. And then the other one to stretch back there is your soleus muscle. So now you're going to go knee bent. Bring that foot in a little bit closer, bend the knee, and then you're going to drive forward again, driving that knee forward. So you'll feel this stretch more at like your Achilles or lower in the shin.
Well, those are pretty simple things to do at home to just improve that. How often should someone be doing that?
Sure. So when we're working on flexibility and mobility, should really be spending some time every day working on that if it's a limitation of yours. And then as it improves, you may not need to do it as frequently, but it's something that you can spend 5 minutes a day trying to improve.
And is this something that someone should do post-ski day as well, after you've worked yourself so hard? Is there anything someone should do to recover?
Sure. I think the mobility exercises are part of your recovery routine, because after being out there all day and in those positions, those muscles that surround the ankle are going to want to tighten up. So it's a good opportunity to stretch to prevent them from over tightening and causing pain.
To sum up this whole video about ankle mobility, a prerequisite to being in a ski boot is having good dorsiflexion. And Andrew went over a variety of ways to assess if you have good dorsiflexion, how to improve it, and the drawbacks of adding a heel lift to your ski boot if you don't have good dorsiflexion, and why you shouldn't add a heel lift if you do. You're going to experience some setbacks. Any other questions, give a call, visit us here in Boston, and of course, where can they find you?
You can find me at High Bar Physical Therapy in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, but we also have clinics throughout Massachusetts and Rhode Island.